Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much, Katie. First of all, thank you all for showing up tonight. I really feel honored. And before I go further into my codependency, I need to take care of a piece of my own recovery business. Back, when was that? November, December, whenever it was that some of you showed up from to hear me do what I'm doing tonight, the codependency. And the person who didn't show up was me. And I appreciate that there was the assumption, which was very kind, that it was a technical difficulty. And there was. The difficulty was me. Unfortunately, I was very excited all the week before. I was very excited on Friday. And when Monday came, I had been home for 4 days and right out my brain it went. And so unfortunately, what really happened was that I forgot. And for that, for all of you who showed up last time, I am so sorry. It triggered me into what we're going to talk about tonight. It triggered me into a short codependency relapse. I was beating the absolute crap out of myself, just shooting all over me, telling myself what a, well, F up I was, just really beating myself up tremendously. When I went into work that Tuesday, I made amends. So I was able to make some amends in the groups that I was working for the folks who were at Pavillon. But of course, I couldn't do anything with y'all until I had the opportunity to do this again, for which I'm so grateful that Katie truly didn't give up on me, that she hung in there and offered me another opportunity. So from the bottom of my heart, for those of you who were here last time, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that I messed up, and I really appreciate you showing up tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much. So now let's look at codependency. Let me give everybody just a brief refresher for just a second, because it's been a while since all of y'all have been at Pavillon, with the exception, of course, of the people who are presently there. I'm not going to go into a full definition, but I'm going to go with the very first sentence, because I think it's an incredibly important sentence of the definition. And this comes from the Codependency Conference of 1990, where codependency was officially defined, if you will. And the very first sentence, and I will own that I did add one word to it, and I'll explain why. But the very first sentence is learned behaviors. What I added was and beliefs, because you can't have behaviors unless you also have beliefs. So learned behaviors and beliefs that are expressed by dependency on people and things outside the self. Does that sound like anything to anybody? Anything familiar that we might go to meetings for? I mean, if that's not the definition of addiction, I don't know what is. Exactly. And yet, so often we think of addiction and codependency as being somehow different or in opposition to each other. And so part of what I want to talk about tonight is how, in fact, codependency is the original or the foundational addiction. We don't have a tendency to think of it that way, but you scrape away the chemical dependency, and every single time you got codependency that is the foundation. I've not yet, and please understand, I truly believe that there is an exception to everything in this world. So I'm sure there's somewhere out there in the world, somebody who's addicted to chemicals that is not a codependent. I just, in 40 some odd years, have not yet met them. My experience is that you get sober and there's a codependency. The rest, what also my experience has taught me is that probably I'm going to give benefit of the doubt and say 90% of the time, maybe 95. Personally, I think it's 100, but we'll go with 95% of the time when people have a little bit of time under their belt, that codependency, the dynamics, the beliefs, the internal stress that is created by these codependent beliefs and behaviors are what lead people back to relapse. I haven't seen an exception yet. I'm sure there's one out there. I just haven't seen it yet. So what am I talking about? It's so clear and easy for those of us who are present tonight to identify the chemical dependency. That became obvious. It landed folks in treatment. It cost a lot of money. It landed people in jail, perhaps, or car wrecks, or breakups of relationships. There was all this carnage, right? And so that became part of the first step. Well, one of the things I want you to consider, and I know y'all have heard this before, and have probably said it to yourself, out of the 12 steps, there is only one that directly ties to chemical dependency. And that's step number 1. So what are the other 11 steps about? We very often don't actually ask that question. We just assume it's all about addiction. And in a sense it is, but not necessarily all about chemical dependency. What I am suggesting is to broaden our definition and look at codependency as being the primary addiction. That is the set of beliefs and behaviors that underlie, that creates the compulsions to engage in behavior that does not make us feel good about us. Anybody, and y'all can just like wave your hand if you want to, anybody in here ever have negative self-talk? Yeah, so where does that come from? I mean, who's in there talking to us? Why couldn't it be positive self-talk? Why isn't it? I mean, how many mass murderers do we have here? Anybody? Anybody out here being a terrorist or going around bombing people? I mean, when you really think about it, what have any of y'all ever done in your lives that is so absolutely horrendously unforgivable that you deserve to have that constant yakking and shooting and negative crap going on in your heads 24 hours a day with an occasional break because you're watching a TV program or you have a friend over or your kids run up and hug you, but it's occasional breaks, isn't it? Now, given that, and that is not unique to those of us talking tonight, my experience again tells me that that's a pretty pervasive state of humankind, that most of us have a lot more negative stuff going on in there than positive. And so the question becomes, how come? Well, what I suggest to you is that this is because of those codependent beliefs and behaviors that we have, because those are the ones that we learn from the time we are knee-high to a grasshopper. They come as a direct result of being human, not of being screwed up, not of being a bad person, not of necessarily having traumas in our life, though I would suggest to you, any of us that were born, just being born is pretty traumatic. We just don't remember it. But that for the most part, it really is simply about being human and the development of the human brain when we are, from the time we're born up until we're in our late 20s. And I give us that 20, 25 year span of time because it isn't until we're in our mid-20s that our adult brain, our ability to be objective about ourselves, our ability to get some distance, if you will, and not necessarily see everything that happens as being about us. You know that feeling? It's all about me. that doesn't occur, doesn't complete, if you will, the maturity of the brain just biologically until we're in our mid-20s. So we got a couple of decades of having a brain that is not fully online, a brain that doesn't have a choice but to see everything in its environment as being directly related to self. It isn't true, but our brain comes to believe that it is. So when we're little children, if mommy and daddy are upset, whose fault must it be? Right? If mommy and daddy are disappointed, whose fault must it be? You know? And with enough of those kinds of moments in our little lives, by the time we're 5 or 6 years old, our basic beliefs about who we are and our value are already formed. And that's psychological fact. Now, how many 5 or 6 year olds do you know that you would like making that kind of a decision for you? And yet that's how we are. Not because we have done anything wrong, not because we're weird, but that's how our brains form. That's how they mature. Children see everything as a direct expression of their worth and value, period. It's just how we are. And that becomes the foundation for all of the things that we then later interpret through those beliefs. So if I have, as a child, believed that I have the power to make people hurt, I can hurt their feelings, I can make them angry, I can make them proud, I can make them love me. Sounding familiar to anybody? Then everything else gets filtered through that. So codependency is in fact pervasive. From the time we are from the time we're conceived, we are dependent on people outside of ourselves, literally, for our very existence. And then as we grow up, we physically, hopefully mentally and emotionally mature some, not always. Some of us are still hanging out there, have that very powerful inner child. But as we mature a bit, then we may not be physically dependent on those big people to take care of us and make sure we survive, but we may well be emotionally dependent. We may very well be dependent on the opinions of our peers for our sense of wholeness. We might be dependent on the grades we make to prove to others that we really do have worth and value. We might be dependent on our athletic prowess, on our ability to beat everybody else at math problems, or, to be the homecoming queen, or to, and then it just continues, where our sense of our value and our worth is dependent on something outside of us. 99% of the time, when we pick up that first drink and drug, and though I'm saying them, let's get real, alcohol is one of those potent drugs around. So if I don't always say alcohol and drugs, and I just say drugs, which I often do, please know I'm talking about all of them, including nicotine. Nicotine was my first drug. I started that at 12 to be cool. Anybody relate to that? Wanting to fit in? Yeah. Most of the time, our very first, not always, folks, but most of the time, there are two primary things I've heard the most over the past 40 some years, and myself experienced, that the first use of a mood altering chemical, whatever that was an attempt to fit in or belong, because, and if you think about it, that kind of says, because I don't feel like I do. I need something to help me feel like I'm going to fit in or belong, be the cool kid, right? Or I'm having some kind of really, really intense, uncomfortable feelings. Maybe I there's my first big breakup with a boyfriend, or maybe it's maybe I have been sexually assaulted, or maybe there's fear and abuse going on in my family, or maybe there's some kind of what we think of as being a big T trauma going on, but something that is frightening. And I reach for a chemical to give me some relief, to make those feelings go away, because I don't know how to. Those are the two most common reasons I have seen for people initiating their first take into trying a chemical to get some relief. And let's get real, folks, they work. You know, they work really well for a while. So emotionally, again, take away the chemical, and what are we left with? We're left with all that emotional stuff. We're left with whatever it is we really and truly feel about ourselves that we don't want other people to know. That we're afraid someday they may find out. That I'm not as kind and generous as I want them to think I am. I remember that was one of mine that I learned in my early recovery, because I was that person who always was the person who was always making sure that everybody was taken care of, that everybody in the office had a birthday cake and a card that everybody signed. You know, I made sure all those kind of things happened, whether I liked a person or not. You know, it wasn't personal. I just took care of everybody. And then in my early recovery, as my sponsor kept asking me things like, Shannon, is that what you really want to do? And of course, I had no friggin' clue what I wanted to do, because I never paid attention to that. I always was out there making sure that I was taking care of everybody else. Anybody relate to that? So, yeah. And so I began to question myself and say, is this something I want to do? Or is there some other reason? Because if I'm doing something I don't really want to do, why am I doing it? And I came to face a very unpleasant truth, one of the first of many in my recovery about me. And that was, I wasn't necessarily making sure everybody had a cake and felt included and had a card that everybody signed in the office because I liked them and cared about them. I was doing that because I wanted them to like and care about me. That was the primary motivation going on. And I got to tell you, I didn't like it. I did not like thinking of myself as being that self-centered, as being that needy. It was really hard for me to accept. And it was still true, whether I liked it or not. So when we're talking about codependency and that original addiction, if you will, my need for other people to like me and approve of me, I was willing to do anything to get it. Even do things I didn't want to do, just in the hopes that if I was nice enough, then people would like me and care about me. Now that's one way it showed. It showed in many other ways in my life as well. But so when we're talking about what the other 11 steps are for, what does the second step tell us? It says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. I will tell you, I always add in, the word I always use is a power greater than my ego, because I got an ego the size of like Montana, you know, that a power greater than my ego can restore me to sanity. And I used to think in the early days that that was referring to the insanity of addiction, the chemical stuff. But then as maturity in the steps began to slowly happen, I came to realize that there's only one step that talks about chemical dependency. And that's the first one. Maybe the second step was talking about all the insanity before the chemical dependency and after the first step, when we're back to what was there before. Are you with me, folks? That's what the other 11 steps, I believe, are really there for, is to actually help us deal with our codependency, with the beliefs that we have about ourselves that are not true, that we're not quite good enough, that I always have to work harder than everybody else just to feel okay, that I have to always be right. Because God knows if I think I'm wrong, I feel like a truly, totally worthless human being. Like I have to be a workaholic. I have to work harder than anyone else. And that's when, of course, our culture really supports. If you're not a workaholic in our culture, you don't get ahead, right? You know, thank God I'm finally retired. I love it. It's great. So all of that negative self-talk that we have that goes on, that doesn't just happen out of the blue. It's based in beliefs that we have about ourselves that we're trying really hard to stay in denial about, that we really don't want to believe, that we really believe deep down about ourselves. So what might they be? They are those things like, I'm not good enough. You know, I'm not lovable. I mean, how many times has someone given you, perhaps paid you a compliment, told you something they really liked about you? And in your mind, it might not have come out your mouth, but in your mind, you thought something along the lines of, boy, if they only knew. And then we go on. Or we'll sit around, maybe having coffee after a meeting, or talk with some of our buds, and we'll talk about some of our crazy thoughts, and then we'll all laugh and go, yeah, I know what you mean. And then we go on. What I'm suggesting to you is that maybe we need to stop. Maybe we need to stop and really look at what we just said, what we just thought, and ask ourselves, what's underneath that? Who says I have to work harder than anybody else just to feel okay? Not even better than, just to feel okay. Who says that? Where did I get that belief? And most of the time we don't ask. We just keep going, running, dancing as fast as we can. And what I would suggest, the way out, as a friend of mine used to say, Richard Applebaum, who used to be one of the supervisors at Pavillon, one of the things he used to say is the way out is in. And that means to stop. Just stop. When you have a negative thought, when you hear something in there that is less than complimentary, stop. Hear it. Really hear it. And ask yourself, would I say this to somebody I loved? My guess is the answer is no way. You would never say probably 90% of what you say to yourself to anybody that you cared about. And yet you do it to yourselves day in and day out without ever thinking about it, without ever challenging it. And my suggestion is to begin to stop, listen, and start to question. Where in the world did I come up with that? Who says I have to be this way, or I shouldn't be that way? Who says I have to act my age? I mean, really? Who says that? And besides that, what is my age supposed to act like? I have no idea. I've never been this age before. You know what? And I'm having a damn good time. And I can guarantee you, I have people in my life who are probably thinking, though they might not tell me that, gee, I wish she'd act her age. But no, and that's usually my grandchildren, because I embarrass them a lot, But that's a good thing we've got to do, is we've got to stop and really begin to question, is this really true? Do I really have to make sure everybody in the family is happy? Who made that my job? And you might hear something like, well, if I don't do it, nobody else will. Says who? That's one of my favorites. Says who? Because usually the answer is me. I say that. Oh, does that make it really true? Or is it just something I believe? Codependency habitually makes us feel badly about ourselves. And we're constantly on, Katie mentioned earlier that gerbil's wheel, just constantly trying to outrun the negative self-talk. Work harder, do more, be kinder, do more, be more generous, sign up for more committees, do this, do that, do this, do that, just constantly more of something. It might be accumulating more, getting better cars, bigger houses, better neighborhoods, more. Maybe that's where we go with it. But what it is a dependency on things and people outside of ourselves to make us feel okay. And what I suggest to you is we came into this world absolutely perfect. Hear those words. We came into this world absolutely perfect. Who we are in the core of our being is absolutely perfect. Have you ever met a 3-month-old that gave a crap whether or not they had pudgy legs? No, because they know they're totally perfect, that the legs don't matter, right? Can you imagine a 6-month-old caring that they have gained 16 pounds? Or, 16 ounces? I guess I haven't gained 16 pounds yet, but 16 ounces? No, they don't care. They know they're perfect. They have an innate sense that they are totally okay just the way they are. We actually have to learn that we are not. And the good news is, if I learned it, I can unlearn it. But that takes work. That takes questioning what goes on in here. Not believing, in fact, believing pretty much nothing that goes on in there without double challenging it. Because trust me, just because it happens in here does not make it true. Though we have a tendency to believe it. And what I would suggest to you is, and many of you remember this, at least the women, from perhaps being in group with me, because I used to have the women write this down, still do at times. At least 95% of what goes on in our heads, our thoughts, are absolute BS. They are not even close to truth. It's just stuff. It's misinterpretations that when mommy was mad at me, it was my fault. And I think now every time somebody's mad, it's my fault. Or that somehow it's my job to make everybody happy. That it's my job to take care of everybody. That it's my job to be the best, to be perfect at whatever. Those are things that we came to believe. Have you ever met a 3-month-old that has that belief? That gives a crap about any of that stuff I just said? Or even a 3-year-old? No. But somewhere along the line, we all come to believe that those negative things we say to ourselves are really true. And we do a whole lot to try to shut those voices up. We try to be perfect. We try to be the prettiest. We try to be the most popular. We try to be the smartest. We try to be the cool kid. We try to find a group. We spend all of this effort trying to look outside of ourselves in order to make our insides feel whole. Has anybody found that ever worked? It never does, because it can't. And in fact, just like any good addiction, the more I seek it, the more I need it. So the fact that I have people in my life that tell me that I'm pretty awesome is never enough, is it? That one person that you might want to love you more than anybody else, no matter how much he or she tells you of, yes, I love you, you're the center of my world, is never enough, is it? You got to hear it one more time. I've got to have one more award. I've got to have one more promotion. I've got to have one more. Does that sound familiar? It's never enough. That's why I say codependency is actually the foundational addiction. And the way to begin to heal that, we are so lucky. We have this thing called a 12-step program. We've got those other 11 steps that are there to help us heal our egos, to help us stop listening to it. Remember that 4th and 5th step that hopefully many of us have done, if not everybody? And remember that 10th step that says, when I am wrong, I promptly admit it. And I would even go so far as to say, look, and I want to say it's page 96 maybe of the 12 and 12. Though I'm not going to swear to that, but it's 90 something because it's talking about the 10th step. It tells us what the spiritual axiom that the 10th step is built on is. And that spiritual axiom is that whenever I am distressed, no matter the cause, so no matter what's happening out here in my surroundings that I think has hurt me, upset me, distressed me, whatever it is, if I am distressed, no matter the cause, there's something wrong with me. It's never this. It's always this. That's what the 10th step is telling us. Now, yes, I can justify you said such and such and I felt very hurt. Okay, why did I feel hurt by that? That's just your opinion. I mean, really. Think about it. I guarantee you, everybody who is on this screen, those we can see and not see, have various opinions about, for instance, me. Some of you like me a lot. You showed up tonight. Some of you think, yeah, so much and not so much. I don't know. Maybe questionable. But everybody's got their different opinion. Now think about this for a second. Which one of it's really true? Which one of it is the real truth about me? Exactly. Because your opinion doesn't have anything to do with me, does it? Not really. It's your opinion. It comes from your thoughts. It actually has nothing to do with me. So when I say you made me mad, you made me sad, you made me hurt, whatever that is, that's not true. I did. That's what the 10th step tells me. No matter the cause, there's something wrong with me. So my suggestion in terms of how do we begin to work our way through and begin to deal with our codependency, it's about using the 12 steps. It's about looking at a power greater than my ego can restore me to sanity. To begin working the 12 steps, not just in the rooms and around the chemical, but as the 12th step tells me, to apply these principles in all of my affairs. So the next time you find yourself, do any of y'all ever have judgmental thoughts about anybody else? I'm sure you must not. Right? No, none of us would do that. No. The next time somebody else might have one of those, stop. If I'm being judgmental, I'm distressed. And let's apply the 10th step. What's going on with me that I'm making this judgment about someone? What's going on with me that I need to be making that judgment in here? How do I feel when I think other people are judging me? Is that a characteristic that I admire in people, that they're critical and judgmental? Most of us don't like that worth a crap, do we? And yet, how often is that what's going on in here? If we're really honest with ourselves. And the big book and the NA text And the Al-Anon, in the section on how it works, tells us that the first attitude that is required is rigorous honesty, not just garden variety, rigorous honesty. And that's got to start here with me. So whether it comes out of my mouth or not, I know if I'm judging you. And I would invite you to notice how quickly that comes back to you. How suspicious you become of other people judging you. How often do we say or think, oh, well, I've got to be a certain way because other people are going to think badly of me. Are they really? Or is that what I do? Because I'm judging people. So I assume everybody else is going to do the same thing. Rigorous honesty. And that's got to start here. So beginning to apply our steps and our principles, not just to not using, but here, every day, here, on how I'm thinking, how I'm behaving, how I'm responding to things, so that I can begin to discover the roots of those things within me, so that I can begin to heal them. In order to do that, I've got to be willing to stop running. I've got to be willing to stop and take a breath. Stop staying quite so busy or so distracted. And just be with me and notice what's going on in here. You know, I remember, I don't know what anybody else's backgrounds are, but I remember I was raised in Baptist / Methodist church, and one of the things I remember is the strong statement, I'll say, judge not lest ye be judged. And while I heard it in the Christian faith, that is a principle, if you will, that is in all of the major religions. It is a universal principle. And if you're willing for just a minute, I would like you to do a little experiment with me. Are y'all willing? Nod your heads if you're willing. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And if you don't want to, that's fine. Just chill out for a minute. I would like you to take a moment and imagine, and if you need to close your eyes or something, please feel free to do that. Just take a moment and imagine in your mind's eye someone that you absolutely adore. And it could be a person, it could be a pet, I don't care, but someone that you just love and adore, and you just get these absolutely wonderful, loving, warm feelings when you think about that being. And just really feel that in your body. Make that a strong, real image in your mind. And just pay attention to how your body feels. Pay attention to the warmth or the coolness that happens, the comfortability of your muscles, your breathing. The tightness or looseness of your neck and chest. Just notice what you noticed about your physical body for a moment as you imagine this person that you care so much about. And when you've got that, then just open your eyes or kind of, give me a wave or something, let me know. Okay, was everybody able to physically experience that sensation? Awesome. Now, I want you to imagine me with a purple mohawk for a minute. Can you see that? Purple mohawk right here. Cool. Now, what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you to think of somebody that you just judge pretty harshly. You just don't like. Just judge them harshly, don't like them. And I want you to bring that image to mind just as strongly. Think about that person, see them in whatever fashion you see them. Think of all that you don't like about that person. And once again, notice your body. Really make sure that image is strong. Notice your body. Notice your breathing. Notice the looseness or tightness of your muscles. As you really put the energy into thinking about how much you don't like that person. Notice how your body feels. And once you've done that, you've made that connection between your body and that image, go ahead and open your eyes and kind of shake it off. Shake it off. See me with a purple mohawk. Yeah. How did that feel, folks? Did you notice a difference in the two? Nod your heads if you did. Yeah. Judgment immediately has a negative impact on us. Immediately, it comes back to us. And it damages not only our emotional body, but it damages our physical body as well. The more we hold on to, very often we call them resentments, but the more we hold on to negative thoughts, judgments, because negative thoughts are pretty much always judgments of some kind. We might call them opinions, but they're still judgments. Anyway, you got it. The more we hold on to that, the more damage is done here. Not even looking at any, we might consider spiritual energy that goes out. And even if we're not looking at that, just what you just experienced in a very small way, that damage accumulates over the years. And it slowly eats away, not only at our emotional and spiritual well-being, but it literally eats away at our bodies too. Because we're not made to hold on to that stuff. We're not, we think about, when we were babies, we didn't hold on to that stuff. We cried, we got over it. We had to learn to hold on to things. Unfortunately, many times we have learned that lesson way too well. And we end up with things like ulcers, migraines, diabetes, all kinds of chronic illnesses that are born very often from all of this stuff that we are holding on to inside that we haven't let go of yet because we don't know how. Very often we just don't know how. And so again, I come back to 12-step recovery. Because 12-step recovery gives me the opportunity to let go of things. It teaches me how important it is to forgive myself as well as others. It teaches me how to approach life in a very different way. It teaches me that I'm responsible for my feelings and my well-being. I'm not responsible for yours. I don't need to carry you in any way. I'm here to support you, but I'm not here to carry you. I'm here to work the steps in all of my affairs. And through the step work, slowly over time, I let go, do enough 4th and 5th steps, right? I do enough 7th and 8th steps. As I continue my work, then I slowly but surely clean out all of that residual stuff that I have held on to for, in my case, decades and decades and more decades. You know, slowly but surely letting these resentments go, these hurts go, because honestly, they don't really matter anymore. I am who I am. How about you? You know, have bad things happened in my life? Yes, they have. Have I done bad things in my life? Yes, I have. Have I been unkind? More often than I care to count. And if I'm busy doing my work of healing, I don't have time to take your inventory. You know, one of the gifts of the 12 steps is that it shows us a way out of the insanity of codependency, the insanity of those negative thoughts and beliefs that we have about ourselves and others that just aren't true. We aren't less than. We are good enough. We are already whole. We are lovable. There is absolutely nothing wrong with any of us. And yet, how many of us actually believe that down in our souls? That's our work, folks. That's our work. And I don't know of a better, more user-friendly, if you will, way to do the work than the 12 steps. Yes, I, like many of you, have been in my own therapy. I've had to do some specialized work because I had absolutely no tools, you know. And today, while that work was incredibly beneficial to me, what sustains me is doing my best to live these steps to the best of my ability. You know, that continual willingness to do a 10th step, to look at me. When I'm feeling something and I'm pointing out here, to bring that back and look at self. To look at what's underneath that negative thing I just said in my head about me or about someone else. Why do I need to feel better than you? What's going on with that? Gee, let me sit with that for a few minutes. What's compelling me to want to make me, in my eyes, look better than you? I'm sure none of y'all struggle with those things, but I do at times, you know? So taking those moments to hear the, if you will, the first addiction is codependency. And to use the steps to help me work my way through that. And that takes a willingness to listen to what goes on in here in a way I haven't before. You know, to be honest with myself about what goes on in here. To stop judging what goes on in here. You know, that's part of why I don't want to look. So, codependency is addiction. It is the foundation for all of the other addictions. Be it chemical, be it workaholism, be it sex addictions, whatever other things that we have. Codependency, if you will, is the foundation for all of them. That's my perspective. I'm not, please understand that's what that is. When I look at the very first sentence of the definition of codependency, and I follow that, that's what it tells me. That is, in fact, the foundation addiction from which all of the others spring. So, I would really appreciate any questions or comments. I don't think I've got much of anything else to say other than, you know, this is the next level of work. The first level was getting sober. You know, that's the first level. The next level of work, in my opinion, is the codependency work. And it's using the same 12 steps. You know, is using every tool that you learn while you're at Pavilion and taking it simply in a, I'll say, deeper direction, perhaps. Looking places maybe we didn't think to look before. Really paying attention to those thoughts that go on in there that are so normal that we don't even question them anymore. You know, we all laugh and go, yeah, yeah, and go on. To really stop and listen, you know, and go, wait a minute, where's this coming from? You know, who says? Who says? So, if anybody's got any questions or comments or want to share something, I would really appreciate it. Because, you know, I know most of the faces I'm looking at have some recovery time. And I have no doubt you've run into some of this, what I've talked about yourselves. So any sharing, I would love to hear. Do I think we can be addicted to recovery? I think we can be addicted to the form of recovery. I don't know about recovery itself because that is such a pervasive process. But can I be addicted to meetings? Can I be addicted to some of the processes of recovery? Yeah, I think probably we can be. I mean, I personally I can get compulsive about pretty much anything. You know, I don't know about y'all, but I can. And the reason I make that a little bit of a separation is only because when we're doing this kind of deeper work, we never know where that's going to end up taking us. And it's important work to do. I mean, can we not pick up a drink or a drug and hold on? I mean, kind of hold on to the arms of our chair and stay sober? Yeah, we can do it that way. But I think that's not what life was intended. That's not what recovery was intended to do. So personally, you know, when I think about recovery, yes, we can be addicted to just about anything. There's a way we can do that. But I think of that being more of a process addiction as rather than a physiological addiction. That's probably the best I can give. Well, first off, caregiving is just that, it's giving. Caretaking is just that, it's taking. That is probably the fundamental difference in the two. And I say it that way because one comes from the heart, and one is about, in a sense, getting something in return. Whether it's that I get to feel good about me because I'm doing such a great job at taking care of this person or situation, or I get accolades from other people about how wonderful I am, something. But so when we're talking about caretaking and caregiving, I think the key components there are those two second words. It's definitely a method of trying to control people, without a doubt. And it's not always easy to know until after the fact. Very often having a resentment because they didn't appropriately appreciate how much I did for them. That's always a good sign that I set myself up for that one. I wasn't really, you know, doing this out of love and care. Unfortunately, very often we end up recognizing that the behavior was, I'll call it a codependent behavior. We end up recognizing that when we end up with negative feelings as a result of the behavior. Initially, at least for me, my early decades of recovery, I had not yet healed enough to be preemptive in my understanding and my behaviors. And so it was after the fact that I would go, oh, I feel this way because I was caretaking, not caregiving. that was one of the first tools my sponsor taught me, was instead of automatically saying, oh, I'll do this, or let me do this for you, or, you know, that kind of thing, was to stop and ask myself the questions, you know, am I doing this to get something? Do I want them to like me? If they don't appreciate what I'm doing, am I going to have negative feelings about this? Because if I am, then I'm not doing it from my heart. I'm doing it to get something. You know, so she taught me some questions to ask myself that, you know, of course, it took me probably another decade to actually begin to apply consistently. Otherwise, I kept setting myself up to, you know, have resentments, you know, things like that. So yeah, that's how I think of it. I'm just, thank you all for showing up tonight. I really appreciate that a lot, and thank you for asking me. I do appreciate the opportunity, because it, you know, recovery is my life, you know, in terms of how I view each day. So thank you so much for allowing me to share some of my thoughts on that. I appreciate it.